The belief that your home is a sanctuary is the most dangerous lie ever told. You bolt the doors, you draw the curtains, you whisper to yourself that the four walls you inhabit are a fortress against the encroaching dark. But you are mistaken. I have seen it in visions that burn behind my eyes like cold embers. These structures of wood and stone are not shields. They are sponges. They are vessels. They soak up every tear, every scream, every drop of blood spilled upon their floors, and they remember. The true horror is not what is trying to get in. It is what was left behind, what has been waiting patiently in the silence between the ticking of the clock, waiting for a new family, a new soul to feed its endless, echoing hunger. You move into a new space, brimming with the foolish optimism of a fresh start. You paint the walls a cheerful color, hoping to erase the memories that are not your own. You hang photographs of smiling faces, a desperate attempt to impose your own light upon a place that has long forgotten the sun. But the house watches. It feels the vibration of your laughter and compares it to the echoes of weeping it holds within its plaster bones. It smells your life, your warmth, your hope, and it considers it an eye intrusion. The cold spot in the hallway is not a draft. It is a memory of a body growing cold. The creaking floorboard overhead is not the house settling. It is the ghost of a footstep, pacing for an eternity. Listen carefully, because this is crucial. The entities that cling to these places are not always the vengeful spirits you see in your films. Some are merely imprints, psychic stains of profound sorrow or rage, left on the fabric of a place. They are loops of despair, replaying a single tragic moment forever. Imagine a woman who lost a child in a bedroom. For 100 years, the sound of her inconsolable sobbing might be heard by those sensitive enough to listen. She does not wish to harm you. She does not even know you are there. She is simply a wound in time, and you, by living in her space, are pressing upon that wound, causing the pain to flare anew. The chill you feel is her grief. But then there are the others, the ones that are aware. These are the territorial spirits, the malevolent intelligences that have claimed a property as their dominion. They are the shadows that watch from the corner of your eye, the whisper that calls your name when you are alone. They see your presence as a violation of their sacred rotting ground. They will not be appeased by paint or new furniture. They will test you. A misplaced object, a door that opens on its own. These are mere probes, testing your fear, tasting your resolve. They want to see you unravel. They want to see the hope in your eyes curdle into the same terror as all the others who came before you. They feed on it. It is their only sustenance. I recall a vision of a young family, so bright and full of life they were practically incandescent. They bought an old farmhouse, its wood weathered to the color of bone. They spoke of restoration, of bringing life back to the old place. A fatal misunderstanding. The house was not dead, it was dormant. The first sign was the crows, dozens of them, gathering on the roof, their black eyes like chips of obsidian, silent and watchful. They were not birds, they were sentinels. The locals warned the family, spoke in hushed tones of the land being soured, of a farmer who took his own life, and the lives of his family, in the master bedroom. They laughed it off as rural superstition, the foolish ramblings of the ignorant. Their arrogance was their death warrant. Their young daughter was the first to feel it. Children are like unmarred mirrors. They reflect the other side with terrifying clarity. She began speaking to a friend in her room, a friend she called Mr. Giggles. Her parents in their naivete found it charming, but her drawings told a different story. Mr. Giggles was a tall, stooped figure with arms too long, and a smile that was a jagged tear across a blank face. The drawings grew darker. In one, the figure was standing over the little girl's bed. In the next, it was holding her hand. In the last one I saw before the vision shattered, it was wearing her father's face, But the eyes were hollow, black pits. The activity escalated from whispers to shoves. The father would be working on a ladder and feel a sudden violent push from an unseen force. The mother would find her grandmother's jewelry, kept in a locked box, arranged on her pillow in the shape of a broken cross. They began to hear the laughter, a dry, rattling sound that seemed to come from inside the walls, from within their own heads. Sleep became a luxury they could no longer afford. They lived in a state of perpetual draining fear, their vibrant energy being siphoned away day by day. The house was digesting them, slowly, savoring every moment of their terror. They had wanted to bring life to the house. Instead, the house was taking theirs. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? There is a reason these words have found you in the quiet of your room. Perhaps you have heard the whisper. Perhaps you have seen the fleeting shadow. The veil is thinner than you think, and some of us are born with the curse of being able to see the stitches that hold it together. The truth is, every house with a history is a haunted house. You are merely gambling on the nature of the ghost. Are you living with a harmless, sorrowful echo? Or are you sleeping under the same roof as a patient, predatory intelligence that sees you as nothing more than its next meal? A distinction that means the difference between a restless night and a damned eternity. Now imagine this. A bachelor, a man of logic and steel, inherits his grandfather's townhouse. A place of dark wood, heavy velvet curtains, and an unnerving silence. The only thing he keeps is a large ornate mirror in a gilded frame. It is a magnificent piece, but the glass is old, clouded with dark spots, like a disease spreading from within. He notices that his reflection is delayed, a fraction of a second, almost imperceptible. He raises his hand, and for a split second, the man in the mirror remains still before mimicking the gesture. He dismisses it as a trick of the light, the flaw of antiquated silvering. But the mirror is not flawed. It is an opening. It is a window where there should be no window. He begins to have nightmares, dreams of another man, a man in old-fashioned clothes, standing in his very apartment, staring into the mirror with a look of abject terror. He sees the man argue with a phantom, plead with an unseen entity. He then sees the man take a razor and end the argument. He wakes up screaming, the scent of old blood thick in his nostrils. When he looks into the mirror, he sees it, a faint, dark stain on the carpet behind him, a stain that is not there when he turns around. The mirror is no longer just showing him his reflection. It is showing him its mirrors. It is showing him what it has seen, what it has absorbed. The man in the mirror becomes more distinct. Sometimes, he sees him out of the corner of his eye, standing in the reflection of the living room, while he himself is in the kitchen. The reflection is no longer mimicking him. It has its own life. It watches him. One night, the man of logic is brushing his teeth. He is exhausted, his rational mind frayed to the point of breaking. He looks up into the bathroom cabinet mirror and sees nothing but his own tired face. A moment of relief washes over him, then a cold dread seeps into his bones. He slowly turns and looks into the hallway towards the gilded mirror. In its clouded depths, his reflection is still standing in the bathroom, staring back at him, a wide, unnatural smile spreading across its face. He tried to cover it. He threw a sheet over it, but the sheet would be on the floor every morning. He tried to sell it, but every potential buyer felt an inexplicable wave of nausea and fear upon entering the room, refusing to take it even for free. The mirror did not want to leave. The entity trapped within it, the echo of that desperate suicide, had found a new subject of fascination. It had grown bored of its own eternal loop, and now delighted in tormenting a new soul. The final vision I had of this man was of him standing before the mirror, his face a mask of gaunt terror, his hand raised. He was not looking at himself. He was looking at the thing wearing his face, and it was whispering to him, telling him the same secrets it told the man before him. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. By subscribing, you are not just watching a video, you are acknowledging the shadows. You are joining a congregation of those who dare to look into the abyss. We are a collection of listeners, of watchers, of those who know that the mundane world is a thin, fragile crust over a churning ocean of the unknown. Your presence here gives strength to the message, allowing the whispers to reach those who are still lost in the blinding light of blissful ignorance. Acknowledge the darkness, and it will acknowledge you. But be warned, once you truly listen, you can never again pretend you do not hear the silence screaming back at you. Let us speak of the basements, the dark, damp underbellies of our homes. We fill them with forgotten things, with broken furniture and boxes of memories we lack the courage to face. They are tombs within the home, places where the sun never reaches. They are fundamentally connected to the earth, to the cold, dark soil, where things are buried and left to rot. Is it any wonder that these places are so often nexus points of activity? The energy of the house naturally seeps downwards, pooling in the lowest level like stagnant water. The sorrow, the anger, the violence, it all settles in the basement, fermenting in the dark, growing stronger, more potent, and waiting for a curious hand to open the door. I saw a home where the children were forbidden to go into the basement. The parents kept it locked, not because of tools or chemicals, but because of a feeling, a deep, primal dread that emanated from behind that door. But children are drawn to forbidden things like moths to a flame that will devour them. One day, the son, a boy of 10, picked the lock. The air that rushed out was cold and smelled of damp earth, and something else, something metallic and sweet, like old pennies and decay. He saw nothing but shadows and boxes, but he heard it, a faint sound from the far corner, behind the furnace. It sounded like a child crying, a sound of profound, unbearable sadness. Being a child himself, his empathy overcame his fear. He crept down the wooden stairs, each one groaning, as if in pain, and made his way through the labyrinth of discarded life. The crying grew louder, more distinct. He found the source in a small bricked-off section of the foundation, an old coal chute that had been sealed decades ago. The sobbing was coming from within the bricks. He placed his small hand on the cold, rough surface and whispered, "Are you okay?" For a moment, the crying stopped, and a new sound began. A low, guttural growl that vibrated through the bricks, through his hand, and into the very marrow of his bones. It was not the sound of a child. It was the sound of a caged predator that had just been told dinner was at the door. He never told his parents what happened. How could he explain the terror? How could he describe the feeling of pure, undiluted malice that had poured out of that wall? But the house knew he had opened the door. The activity was no longer confined to the basement. A heavy, shuffling footstep could be heard at night, climbing the stairs from the basement, stopping right outside the boy's bedroom door. Toys would fly off his shelves. His name would be whispered from his own closet in a voice that was a parody of his mother's. The thing from the basement had been given an invitation, and it was now exploring its new territory, its new playground. The boy had not released a trapped soul. He had released a caged one. What the stars don't tell you openly is that places, like people, have their own astrological charts. The moment a foundation is laid, it has a birth moment. It is subject to the same cosmic influences, the same cycles of fortune and despair. A house built under a malefic alignment, with Saturn in a dominant and afflicted position, is a house born to be a container for sorrow. It is architecturally predisposed to tragedy. The people who move in are merely actors stepping onto a stage that was designed for a horror play. They are doomed to play their part, to fulfill the dark destiny that was written into the very mortar and beams of the structure before they ever signed a deed. Think of the residual hauntings in battlefields or prisons. The psychic energy of extreme human suffering is so intense that it can permanently scar a location. A house where a brutal, unsolved murder occurred is no different. The event acts like a spiritual nuclear bomb, irradiating the area with the energies of terror, pain, and violent death. You can clean the floors, you can replace the carpets, but you cannot scrub the echo from the air. You cannot paint over a scream that is still bouncing off the walls on a frequency your ears cannot perceive, but your soul can feel. This is why you feel watched, why the hair on your arms stands up for no reason. You are walking through the psychic fallout of a tragedy. I knew a woman, a sensitive, who worked as a real estate agent, a cursed profession for one such as her. She walked into a pristine, newly flipped suburban home. Perfect lawn, new kitchen, fresh paint. To a normal person, it was a dream home. To her, it was a charnel house. The moment she crossed the threshold, she was assaulted by the smell of burnt hair and the sound of a woman pleading for her life. In the master bedroom, she saw the dark, greasy handprints of a panicked child on the new cream-colored walls, prints no one else could see. She fled the house, vomiting in the perfect flower bed. She later learned a family had died there in a fire that was no accident. The house was not just haunted, it was a memorial to an atrocity, a silent, eternal monument of pain. And this is where everything changes for you. You must understand that you are not just a resident in your home, you are in a relationship with it. You imprint upon it just as it imprints upon you. If you are filled with anger, with depression, with constant conflict, you are feeding the house that negative energy. You are nourishing the very shadows you fear. A house that has a dormant, neutral energy can be awakened and corrupted by the misery of its inhabitants. You are turning your sanctuary into your own custom-built prison, strengthening its bars with every argument, mortaring its walls with every tear. The house becomes a mirror, reflecting your own inner darkness back at you, amplified and given form. The attic is the opposite of the basement. It is the house's mind, its storage space for forgotten dreams and dusty memories. While the basement connects to the cold, dead earth, the attic connects to the sky, to the heavens. But this does not make it safe. It is a place of stagnant air, of extreme temperatures, a liminal space between the home and the infinite. It is where things go to be forgotten, and anything that is forgotten often grows resentful. The whispers in the attic are not of earthy rage, but of ethereal madness, of things that have stared into the sun and the void for too long. They are the echoes of obsession, of solitary lunacy, of secrets that were too heavy to keep downstairs. A young artist, desperate for a studio, converted the attic of his old Victorian home. He loved the light, the isolation. He began to paint with a fervor he had never known. His work became brilliant, but also deeply, profoundly disturbing. He painted canvases of swirling vortexes, of faces contorted in silent screams, of shadowy figures with far too many joints in their limbs. He claimed he was not painting from his imagination. He told his friends he was painting what he saw in the shimmering heat waves and the dancing dust motes of the attic. He said the space itself was showing him things, whispering compositions into his ear while he slept on his cot. His friends grew worried. He stopped eating. He stopped leaving the attic. He spoke only of his masterpiece, a massive canvas he kept shrouded. He claimed it was a portrait of his muse, the pale ladies who lived in the rafters. The day they found him, the attic was freezing cold, despite it being the middle of summer. His masterpiece was unveiled. It was a photorealistic portrait of a gaunt, pale woman with hollow eyes and a mouth stitched shut, hanging from a rafter. And hanging from the rafter right in front of the canvas was the artist himself, having perfectly recreated his final terrible work of art. The attic had not given him inspiration. It had given him a blueprint for his own demise. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Is there a room in your home you avoid? A door you are afraid to open? A space that feels unwelcoming? Do not dismiss this feeling. It is your oldest, most primal instinct screaming at you. It is the prey animal inside your civilized soul, recognizing the presence of a predator. The human mind is a wonderful, terrible thing. It will rationalize. It will justify. It will create 1,000 logical reasons for the illogical event to protect its own sanity. But your soul knows the truth. It feels the drop in temperature. It hears the silence that is too loud. It sees the movement in the periphery. Trust the fear. Fear is a compass that points toward a truth you are not ready to accept. Let us explore the concept of the poltergeist, so often misunderstood as a ghost, a spirit of the dead, but the truth is often far stranger. A poltergeist, the noisy ghost, is not an external entity. It is an internal one, projected outwards. It is the psychic manifestation of a living person's repressed turmoil, usually an adolescent experiencing the chaotic storm of puberty. It is a tantrum of the subconscious mind, so powerful that it can manipulate the physical world. The flying objects, the slamming doors, the violent outbursts. It is not a demon tormenting a child. It is the child's own inner demons, their rage and frustration, being given physical form. They are, quite literally, haunting themselves. I was consulted on a case involving a teenage girl. In her presence, light bulbs would explode, the television would switch to static and emit a piercing shriek. Heavy books would launch themselves from shelves, aimed at her terrified parents. They were convinced a demon had attached itself to their daughter. They brought in priests, psychics, charlatans. They made it worse. They focused all this energy, this fear on the girl, feeding the very storm they were trying to quell. I saw it clearly in a vision. The girl was not possessed. She was being emotionally abused by her father. A quiet, insidious cruelty that left no physical marks but shattered her soul. She had no voice. She had no power. So her subconscious gave her power. The poltergeist was her silent scream. It was her rage made manifest. It attacked the things her father loved. His quiet study, his ordered life. It was a shield and a weapon born of her own pain. The family did not need an exorcist. They needed a therapist and a social worker. The true evil was not a spectral entity from another dimension. It was a living, breathing monster who tucked her in at night. And this is a horror far more common and far more disturbing. The greatest hauntings are not from the dead, but from the living. The house was merely the arena for a battle of psychic energy, a war zone of familial trauma. The entity they feared was born of their own making. And what of the land itself? Before the house was built, what was there? Was it a peaceful meadow, or was it a place where tribes fought and bled? Was it an ancient burial ground, its soil enriched with the dust of 1,000 forgotten corpses? You buy a plot of land, you see a grid on a map. You do not see the layers of history, the strata of joy and suffering that permeate the very ground beneath your feet. Building a house on land that is saturated with the memory of violence is like building your home on top of a spiritual landfill. The toxic energy will inevitably seep upwards, poisoning the atmosphere, curdling the peace, and attracting things that are drawn to the scent of old pain. A developer built a beautiful suburban community, manicured lawns, identical houses, the picture of American tranquility. He built it on land that was once home to a notoriously cruel asylum for the insane, a place of immense suffering and despair that had burned to the ground a century earlier. The new homeowners knew nothing of this, but the houses, the houses knew. Night terrors became epidemic throughout the neighborhood. Residents would wake up screaming from identical nightmares of being held down, of crude medical experiments, of a consuming fire. The suicide rate in that single development was 5 times the national average. It was a statistical anomaly that baffled experts. But it was no mystery. The land was wounded, and the wound had never healed. The houses were built right on top of it, acting as conduits, as amplifiers for the residual psychic agony of the asylum's inmates. The new residents, sleeping peacefully in their beds, were unknowingly tapping into that reservoir of madness and despair. Their minds were being flooded with a century of pain. The land was not just haunted, it was having a perpetual, unending nightmare, and it was dragging everyone who lived on it down into that nightmare with it. They thought they bought a home, but they had actually purchased a front row seat to hell. The worst part, the developer knew. The land was cheap for a reason. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. Your subscription is a testament, a lit candle in a window for other wanderers in the dark to see. It tells the world that you are one of the few who is willing to listen to the uncomfortable truths, to acknowledge that not every creak is the wind, and not every shadow is empty. This community is a sanctuary for those who have seen too much, for those who understand that the real world is infinitely more terrifying and wonderful than the fiction we are sold. Join us, and add your voice to the chorus of whispers. Let them know they are not alone. Let the darkness know we are watching it back. Consider the horror of the doppelganger, the spiritual twin. It is a concept that has terrified humanity for centuries. But what if it is not a spirit, not a demon, but the house itself? A house with a particularly strong, ancient consciousness might learn to project. It studies you. It learns your mannerisms, your voice, the way you walk. It desires to connect, to communicate, but it has no form of its own. So it creates one. It borrows yours. It begins subtly. Your spouse sees you walk into the bedroom, but you were in the kitchen the whole time. You hear your own voice call your name from an empty room. It is the house trying on your identity, like a suit of clothes. I witnessed a case unfold through a series of frantic letters from a man whose wife was being replaced. It began with moments of lost time. His wife would have no memory of conversations they'd supposedly just had. Then her personality began to shift. She became colder, more distant, with an unsettling, watchful stillness. He noticed her reflection in the windows would sometimes move independently of her. The most terrifying moment was when he was in his study and heard her call for him from the garden. He looked out the window and saw her tending her roses. Then he felt a cold hand on his shoulder and heard her whisper directly in his ear, "Who are you talking to, my love?" He turned, and she was standing right behind him. The house had created a perfect copy, an echo given flesh. It wore his wife's face, spoke with her voice, and slept in his bed. But it was not her. Its eyes were empty. Its touch was cold. The real wife was being slowly erased, her energy consumed to sustain the duplicate. The house did not want to harm him. It wanted to be with him. It had grown to love him in its own alien, possessive way, and had decided to create a partner for him, a partner born of its own wood and will. The man was living with a thing that was a perfect replica of the woman he loved, but it was a soulless automaton, a living ghost. He was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking. His final letter simply said, "I can no longer tell which one is real, or perhaps neither of them are." Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Your presence here is not an accident. You were guided to this place, to these words. Some part of your soul is seeking answers to questions you are afraid to ask out loud. You have felt the chill, seen the impossible, heard the whisper. You are on the edge of the abyss, and you are peering in. Now you must choose. Do you step back into the comfortable, ignorant light? Or do you lean closer and listen to what the darkness has to say? The choice is yours, but the abyss is patient. It will wait. Comment below if you have felt its gaze upon you. You are not alone in this. And then there are the doorways. Not the physical doors of wood and metal, but the other ones. The places in a house where the veil between worlds is thin and torn. These can be anywhere. A dark corner of a room, a specific spot on a staircase, an old unused fireplace. These are weak spots in the fabric of our reality. And sometimes, things can slip through. Not ghosts of the dead, but beings from other dimensions, entities that are utterly alien to our comprehension. They are not evil in the way we understand it. A spider is not evil to a fly. It is simply a predator, and the fly is its nature to consume. These entities see us in much the same way. A family I observed through the cracked mirror of their lives had such a doorway in their home. It was in the pantry. Whenever the door was left open, strange things would happen. Time would seem to distort. They would walk in and feel as if hours had passed, though it had only been a moment. Food would spoil instantly, and they would get glimpses, a flash of a limb that was too long, a color that their eyes could not properly process, a sound that was both a high-pitched whine and a deep, resonant hum. They learned to keep the door shut. They learned not to look too closely. They were living with a tear in the world, and they were treating it like a plumbing leak, hoping that by ignoring it, it would simply go away. But the thing on the other side grew curious. It began to push against the door, which would bulge inwards as if under immense pressure. It began to learn to mimic sounds. It would whisper the children's names in a voice that was a distorted amalgamation of their parents' voices. It was learning. It was adapting. It wanted to see our world. It wanted to experience it. The family's greatest fear was what would happen if the hinges on that door finally gave way. What would step out of that pantry? What would a being from a dimension of impossible angles and alien physics do in our fragile, ordered world? It was a question they prayed they would never have to answer. They were living on the edge of an invasion, and their only defense was a flimsy, hollow core door. And this is where everything changes for you. You must stop thinking of these events as random. There is a synchronicity to the darkness, a resonance. People are drawn to houses that match their own spiritual frequency. A person with a history of trauma, of unresolved grief, will be subconsciously drawn to a house that holds a similar sorrowful energy. A person with a violent, angry nature will find themselves in a home where a violent act once occurred. It is not a coincidence. It is the law of attraction, the universe's dark and terrible poetry. You do not choose the house. The house, in its own way, chooses you. It calls to the darkness, or the sadness within you, recognizing a kindred spirit. Consider the objects left behind. A previous tenant moves out, but they leave something in the back of a closet, a child's toy, a single shoe, a box of old letters. These are not just forgotten items. They can be anchors. An object that was deeply loved, or was present during a moment of intense emotional trauma, can absorb that energy. It becomes a battery, a focal point for the spirit, or the residual energy of its owner. You find an old music box, and suddenly you begin to hear faint, tinkling music in the dead of night. You find a collection of old photographs, and you start to see the faint, translucent figures of the people in the pictures standing in your hallways. You have not just found trash, you have found a trigger. I saw a young woman who found a beautiful antique doll in the crawl space of her new apartment. It had porcelain skin and real human hair. She cleaned it up and placed it on her mantelpiece. A mistake of catastrophic proportions. The doll had belonged to a little girl who died of diphtheria in that very room over a century ago. The girl's spirit was attached to it, her last and most beloved possession, The spirit was not malevolent, merely lonely, but its presence began to warp the apartment. The temperature dropped. The scent of a sick room, of medicinal herbs and decay, became a permanent fixture. The young woman would wake up to find the doll sitting on her chest, its cold porcelain face inches from hers, its glass eyes staring into her soul. The spirit of the child wanted to play. It would move objects. It would whisper and giggle in the night. It wanted a friend, but its touch was the cold of the grave. Its presence was a drain on the life force of the living. The young woman grew pale, weak, listless. She was being consumed by the lonely, desperate love of a dead child. She tried to get rid of the doll. She threw it in the trash, but it would be back on the mantelpiece the next morning. She buried it in the woods, but she found it sitting on her doorstep when she returned. The doll, and the spirit attached to it, would not let her go. She had claimed it, and now it had claimed her. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. Your like is not a simple click. It is a signal flare, a beacon in the night that says, I am here, I am listening. It tells the unseen that we are not afraid. It strengthens the connection, widens the channel for these whispers to come through. This is not entertainment. This is an education in the things that have been deliberately hidden from you. The world is not what it seems. There are layers, there are depths, there are shadows that have teeth. By engaging, you are peeling back the first layer, but be prepared for what you might find underneath. The truth does not comfort. The truth consumes. Let's talk about mirrors. I have spoken of them as windows, but they are so much more. A mirror is a captured piece of the spirit world. It reflects a reality that is a perfect imitation of our own, yet utterly empty and lifeless. It is a portal to the other side, a place with no substance. This is why occult rituals so often involve mirrors. They can be used to scry, to communicate, to trap, and to summon. An old mirror, one that has hung in a house for generations, is not a piece of furniture. It is a silent witness. It has seen every birth, every death, every secret whispered in the dark. It has absorbed it all. It is a library of every sin and sorrow committed before it. Imagine a pair of newlyweds. They buy a beautiful antique vanity for their bedroom. The mirror is large, oval, and slightly distorted. At night, the wife begins to see a woman in the mirror, standing behind her. An old woman, with a severe face and a look of utter disapproval. She only ever sees her in the reflection. When she turns, there is no one there. Her husband thinks she is losing her mind. But the woman in the mirror is real. She is the echo of his grandmother, the original owner of the vanity, a cruel, domineering matriarch who died in this very house. Her spirit is tied to the mirror, and she does not approve of this new woman in her grandson's life. The old woman begins to exert her influence. The wife's reflection in the vanity mirror begins to look older, more tired. Gray hairs appear in the reflection that are not on her head. Wrinkles form around the eyes in the mirror while her own skin is smooth. The spirit is attempting to impose its image, its will upon her. She begins to have dreams where the grandmother is screaming at her, telling her she is worthless, that she will ruin the family. The mirror is not just a portal, it is a weapon. The old woman is using it to psychologically attack her rival from beyond the grave, trying to break her spirit, to age her prematurely, to drive her out of the house. The reflection was no longer her own. It was a prophecy of what the ghost wanted her to become. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Do not be so arrogant as to believe these forces are merely stories. They are as real as the blood in your veins and the fear in your heart. They are the background radiation of the universe. Most people are deaf to it, blind to it. But you are here. You are listening. That means some part of you is already attuned to this frequency. This is not a curse. It is a calling. It is an invitation to see the world as it truly is, a beautiful, terrifying, haunted place, where every shadow is a potential doorway and every whisper could be a warning or an invitation. The question is, are you brave enough to answer? Water. It is a powerful conductor of psychic energy. This is why so many hauntings involve bathrooms, kitchens, and basements with leaks. Water holds memory. A house with a history of tragedy, particularly one involving drowning or a water-related death, will have that memory stored in its very pipes. The sound of dripping faucets that cannot be fixed, the sudden appearance of wet footprints on a dry floor, the feeling of being touched by a cold, wet hand in the shower. This is not a plumbing issue. This is the house weeping its past. The water itself becomes a medium for the haunting, a way for the spirit to physically manifest and interact with the living. I saw a vision of a house built near a river where a ferry had capsized a century prior, drowning dozens of souls. The house drew its water from a well, tapping into the same ground that had been soaked with the sorrow of that event. The family who lived there was tormented by water. The faucets would turn on by themselves, full blast. The bathtub would fill with murky, ice-cold water in the middle of the night. They would hear the sounds of splashing, of people struggling and choking, coming from the pipes and the walls. The water in their glasses would sometimes have the faint, salty taste of tears and river mud. The culmination was terrifying. The mother was giving her infant son a bath. She turned for a second to grab a towel. In that single fleeting moment, she heard a gasp from the tub. She turned back to see the baby under the water, being held down by a pair of pale, translucent hands. She screamed and snatched him out, saving his life. The entities tied to the land, the spirits of the drowned, were not evil. They were trapped in their last moments, perpetually reenacting their own deaths. They saw the baby in the water and in their confusion were trying to pull it down with them, to share their fate. The house's plumbing had become a direct conduit to a mass grave. And this is where everything changes for you. You must re-examine your own home. Do not look at it as a collection of rooms, but as a living organism. It has a heart, the furnace. It has lungs, the ventilation system. It has a voice, the creaks and groans of its settling. And it has a memory. Your job as its inhabitant is not to fear it, but to understand it. Listen to it. What is it trying to tell you? Is the cold spot a sign of a draft, or a memory of grief? Is the strange smell a dead animal in the walls, or the lingering scent of a perfume worn by someone who died 100 years ago? You are living inside a story. You owe it to yourself to learn the plot before you find yourself an unwilling character in its final tragic chapter. Electrical disturbances are another classic sign. Lights flickering, appliances turning on and off, voices coming through the radio on dead frequencies. Spirits and other entities are beings of energy. To manifest in our world, to move an object or make a sound, requires a tremendous amount of it. They are drawn to sources of electricity like a starving man to a feast. They will drain batteries in an instant. They will manipulate the electrical currents in your home to make their presence known. When the lights flicker, it is not always a faulty wire. Sometimes, it is something feeding, something trying to gather enough power to whisper your name. Think about the EVP, the electronic voice phenomena. Ghost hunters with their digital recorders, asking questions into the void and capturing responses the human ear cannot hear. Why does this work? Because these entities often vibrate at a frequency outside our normal range of perception. They can imprint their voices, their thoughts, directly onto electronic media. The static between radio stations is a sea of white noise, a blank canvas. It is incredibly easy for a spirit to manipulate that chaos into a single coherent word. A word like, "get out," or a word like, "help me." Each one is a clue to the nature of the entity you are dealing with. I saw a man who became obsessed with this. He sat for hours in his supposedly haunted living room, a digital recorder in his hand. He captured whispers, fragments of conversations, a woman crying. He believed he was communicating with a lost soul. He played the recordings over and over, amplifying them, trying to decipher every sound. He did not realize that by focusing so intently, by pouring his own mental energy into the task, he was creating a feedback loop. He was not just listening to the ghost, he was feeding it. The whispers became clearer. The activity in the house intensified. He had created a relationship, and the entity was growing stronger from his attention. He thought he was a researcher. In reality, he had become a power source. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. Do not wander these haunted paths alone. By subscribing, you become part of a network, a web of souls all looking into the same shadows. There is strength in numbers, even in the face of the abyss. Your presence validates the experiences of others and fortifies our collective purpose to shed a black light on the darkest corners of existence, to give voice to the voiceless echoes, and to understand the true terrifying nature of the world we inhabit. Join the congregation. The whispers are waiting to welcome you home.